Yeah.
So choir? When we do this opening song, I'm sure you can understand before I start. So by the way, we're trying to break today.
Do it again. Stand up.
In about a minute, I'll turn to you and stand you up. I went to my office and called a few people. I said, get over here. I called them.
Oh, Liz is here. Yay.
18. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure I don't remember this story, except that you just sent me a card.
A lot of people are still coming in.
Yes. Flowers.
Too long.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane. Say that fast. We're glad to have you with us. Ours is a welcoming congregation. We appreciate your unique background, beliefs, or lifestyles. If you're one of our long-term members or have been here only a short time, or if you're joining us today for the very first time, we are delighted to meet you and have you here. Welcome to everyone, especially to those who are watching from home. Now, Board of Trustees member Warren Carpenter, who's a slight relation to me, has an announcement.
Good morning. Your Board of Trustees has asked me to make this announcement, and Marilyn has asked me to make it quickly, so I will proceed. Last Sunday we had 2 cars broken into. There were some important valuables stolen, and we are obviously very concerned about that. We are taking measures to improve the security around the church and in the parking lot, but meanwhile, please lock your cars and do not leave valuables in plain sight. And on another note, we need ushers. Ushers are the folks who greet you and say hello to you and help you into your seats from time to time during the services. So those extroverts of you out there who enjoy chatting with folks and meeting people and helping people, we would really like to have your assistance in joining the ushering team. We try to have the ushers meet just once a month, serve just once a month, and the tasks are simple and kind of fun to do. So if that speaks to you, please get in touch with me or one of the ushers that are serving now. So thanks very much.
I have to add a note to that. When I usher, I love it. It's fun. You can say to people, "Good morning," and they perk up. Or when they leave, you can say, "Have a great week." And they look like, "Oh, maybe I will." So sign up to be an usher. It's a very important job. Now, please take a few moments to greet one another, and be sure to say hi to someone you haven't met yet.
Hey, Marilyn.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. That reminds me to say something. If you cannot hear, raise your hand, and Andy back there in the booth will do something about it. Or we will come like this. How's that? Oh, Jim Lee likes that. So we will have more time to greet one another and share our stories during social hour after the service, which as always includes good coffee and good conversation. And I have another note One person said, "Where do you sign up to be an usher?" See that man over there that's slightly related to me? He will help you with that. We now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost. The opening reflection is from this book, Touch Magic. And I have to say something I forgot to say. Our guest speaker today is Crutcher, and I'll introduce him more. Raise your hand if you can't hear me. And I will give him a better introduction later. The opening reflection is from Tough Magic by Jane Yolen, who is another prolific author of books for adults and children and teens. Whoops. Our history is apocryphal. I said it wrong. I need Warren to tell me again. I'm going to start over. Our history is apocrypha, humanity's innumerable glosses on great unanswerable questions. What we must never forget, though, is the answers come from human sources. The storyteller, the writer, is a human mired in society. The writer's art represents the ideas and beliefs and prejudices of a particular society. Preserving them is like preserving flies in amber. And the power of the word in print is far beyond that of the spoken word, a ring of truth far greater and more subtle than that which is sent into the air. Think of our cell phones. Every written down story carries a much binding power as a contract. I'm going to read that again. It's very powerful. Every written down story carries as much binding power as a contract. Speech is ephemeral. It soon fades away. A book remains for the life of its paper and print, and thus its imprint persists in the lives of its hundreds and even thousands of readers. Gifts do not come free. The price in this case is vigilance. We must guard the magic that is inherent in imagination. The Huns and the Vandals are always at the gates. And storytellers must remember that, in the words of author Ursula Guin, to light a candle is to cast a shadow.
Let's have our first in-service hymn. It's going to be number 301, Touch the Earth and Reach the Sky. You may access your gray hymnal or the screen. Please stand as you're willing and able.
Touch the earth. I'd like to invite children of all ages to come up. Oh, good, we have some children. Come on up, sweetheart. Atta girl. Yay. Wonderful, wonderful. Nice work, you guys. Now, I'm going to need a little bit of your help. Can you help me just a little? Okay. This book is called Red, A Crayon's Story by Michael Hall. He was red. Now, this is where I need your help. This crayon has a what color wrapper on it? Red. What color point does it have on it? Blue. Okay, keep that in mind, audience. Okay? He was red, but he wasn't very good at it. His teacher thought, his teacher thought he needed more practice. Scarlet, his teacher, said, I'll draw a red strawberry and then you draw a red strawberry. And Red said, okay. But he didn't really get it right. His mother thought he needed to mix with other colors. She said, why don't you two go out and draw a nice round orange? Yellow said, a really big one, and Red said, a really orange one. They made a really green one. Yeah. Everyone seemed to have something to say, and this is what the colors said. Amber said, sometimes I wonder if he's really red at all. Hazelnut said, don't be silly, it says red on his label. Cocoa Bean said, he came that way from the factory. Fuchsia said, frankly, I don't think he's very bright. Grape said, well, I think he's lazy. Yeah. Army Green said, right, he's got to press harder. Steel Gray said, he's got to really apply himself. Sunshine said, give him time, he'll catch on. And Sea Green said, of course he will. But he didn't catch on. Green made a green frog. Black made a black sheep. Brown made a brown cow. And red made a blue ant. Did that make sense? No, I don't think so. All the art supplies wanted to help. The masking tape thought he was broken inside. The scissors thought his label was too tight. I thought he wasn't sharp enough. But even with all our help and all his hard work, he couldn't get the hang of it. What color did he keep making? Blue. Everybody together, what color did he keep making? Blue. Right, okay. One day he met a new friend. The new friend's name was Barry. Barry said, will you make a blue ocean for my boat? I can't, I'm red. Will you try? So he did. Thank you, said Barry, it's perfect. And he didn't stop there. He made blue bells and blue jeans, blueberries and a blue whale. He was blue. And everyone was talking. And this is what the crayons said now. Olive said, my son is brilliant. Amber said, who could have known he was blue? Hazelnut said, I always said he was blue. Cocoa Bean said, it was obvious. Berry said, his blue ocean really lifted me. Sea Green said, all his work makes me happy. Brown said, his blue strawberries are my favorite. Apple Green said, he's so intense. Yellow said, I'm going to make a green lizard with him, a really big one. Gray said, I hear he's working on a new project. And Scarlet said, he's really reaching for the sky. And he really was. And that's the end of our story. Thank you for being such good listeners. Thank you all. Shall we sing our children out? Now in peace, go now in peace. Way to go. The Spirit of love
Thank you, Martha. I have to tell you, Martha lives in Newport. She emailed me last night that they weren't sure they could get here on time this morning, so they drove to Spokane last night and stayed in a hotel. How about that for dedication? We now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and our mission to the larger world. Each time we gather as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our hearts and minds, and who we want to wrap in our love and care. We kindle a light this morning for the victims and families of the carnage at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, and for all those in our world that are suffering from gun violence. Another candle is for Scott Fitzgerald, who is recovering from a bad fall. And the last one we're kindling is for Karen and Richard Seeley. Karen is entering into hospice care and has stopped eating. Please keep Karen and Richard and their entire family in your thoughts at this time. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here in our hearts this morning. You are welcome to say their names aloud as you are willing. those named aloud and those remembered in the silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. Please get comfortable for our meditation. Put your feet on the floor, lean back. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. We're changing the order of service slightly today because our guest speaker, Chris Crutcher, is going to do the reading from one of his books. It's an honor to welcome Chris Crutcher as our guest speaker. The title of his talk is Our Kids This Time. I have to tell you a personal story about Chris. When I was teaching young adult literature at Eastern Washington University, he came to my classes every quarter. And I would start the quarter off by saying, you have to read 100 books in this class. And they would look at me like I was giving them a death sentence. And then I would say, but they're written for young adults, and there's even picture books that you can choose, because I had a library of 60,000 books. And then I would say, you know, Chris Crutcher is going to come to class, and you should read at least one of his books. So choose one, read it, put it in your reading record, and we're going to have some discussions about it. They would come back, instead of complaining after they had read one of his books, and they would say, I want to read them all. Those books touched these young adults' lives and made such a difference for them. And then, when Chris came to class, they were powerfully moved. Now, I could tell you every one of his 15 books, the titles, but I'm just going to say he has a new book coming out this April entitled Loser's Bracket. Now, I could also tell you of his endless awards, but I'm just going to mention one or two. Every year, the American Library Association's journal book list issues the best books of the year. But at the end of the last century, they issued their best 100 books for the year. Only one person had 8 titles on that list. Who do you think? He's also received other awards, too many to talk about now because you need to hear him. But one of the ones I'm so impressed with, he received the Slate Intellectual Freedom Award. How about that? Intellectual Freedom Award. Chris has been, and this is very important, a consultant and a family therapist in Spokane for over 30 years. He is a Spokane treasure.
I guess we'll see about that. I sometimes think of if my father were he still alive or my mom knew that I would be in anything resembling a church reading from one of my books, it'd be a whole new experience for them. This comes from actually not a book of fiction. It's a book called King of the Mild Frontier, and it's kind of my homage to Davy Crockett. I was a little Davy Crockett freak when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had a coonskin cap and I had a little powder horn and all those kinds of things. I ran around with a gun that could only kill one person every 3 weeks. And I knew I was not anywhere near tough enough to be king of the wild frontier, which was Davy Crockett. But being king of the mild frontier, I was possibly there. This particular passage was chosen for me, and it couldn't have been chosen. It couldn't have been chosen any better. Because it so fits with kind of where we are today. Anyone who reads my stories today knows I often throw a religious theme into the conflict in a significant way in stories like Staying Fat for Sarah Burns and Running Loose, and through smart-ass aside comments by characters and most of the others. So it's not surprising that students around the country often ask me if I'm a Christian. I'm not, and it isn't because a few semi-literate mentors in my history were unable to explain Bible stories to me. Most of the reasons I won't go into here, but I will say it started when I realized the God who allowed me to get into my bed to converse with him rather than kneel on the cold hardwood floor was a lot closer to the God in whose image I was supposed to be created than the one the red brick church tried to use to frighten me into good behavior. The scientist in me refuses to let me believe that biology altered for a brief moment a little over 2,000 years ago to make way for a virgin birth. I think Jesus would have laughed at that notion. It wasn't his, by the way. So while I have no problem believing he was one wise and spiritually connected fellow, and no problem capitalizing his pronoun, I don't subscribe to many of the stories and thoughts that have sprung up around him. As a child abuse and neglect therapist, I did battle daily with Christians enamored of the Old Testament phrase, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." No matter how far I stretched my imagination, it does not stretch far enough to include the image of a cool dude like Jesus taking a rod to a kid. I believe there was a big bang, and that because of that we are all connected into infinity, and I know very little having to do with human beings that doesn't have to do with connection. We want to be noticed. We want to be good enough. We want friends, and we want to be loved. We want our place to stand. I believe that spiritual men and women throughout history felt and feel these things at some core level, and the statement that we are all created in the image of God is a duh. Because we are all products of the universal flow of energy emanating from that bang. And that's a lot of bang for our buck. I say that because when I answer no to the question, "Are you a Christian?" I always sense a certain discomfort in the room because it's nearly always asked by a Christian. Recently in an interview, I was asked if I thought life is fair. Because the lives of many of my characters are so hard, the interviewer expected me to say that life is certainly and obviously not fair. But life is exactly fair. It has order and randomness, and it moves through the universe without prejudice or passion. People aren't always fair, and it seems the less we know, the more unfair we are. But I think that a big part of the business of religion should be to understand that nothing is fairer than life, and that mysterious ways are mostly mysterious because of our ignorance. Thank you. Good morning again. Long time no see. When Marina and Marilyn contacted me about speaking here today, I thanked them for finally offering me a venue to kick off my ministry. If an internet silence can be truly deafening, that was it. I've known Marilyn for a long time, like a really long time. So she felt comfortable revealing to me that the Unitarian Church is a strong and viable entity. Even though it is a strong and viable entity, it's not likely strong enough to take the public drubbing it would take for launching anything that remotely resembled a Chris Crutcher ministry. She said, we were just thinking of having you give a little talk. I'm thankful she got to me before I went out and bought the appropriate garments. So, a little talk. When we came on the title of Our Kids this time, I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to say. I see kids. I've spent my life being around kids. I was a kid around kids all that time. I was a teacher in an alternative school and then a director of an alternative school down in Oakland for 10 years for kids that were not making it in the Oakland public schools, K through 12. And I hadn't written any books yet, but I wanted to. And I realized that I was just in a hotbed of story and a hotbed of characters. And so there was just this thing of paying attention. Then I came back up to Spokane, and I just had a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology, but back in those days, that and a little training could get you into these brand new projects that were going on, working with child abuse and neglect families. And the mental health center, back when there was funding for all these kinds of these programs, were hiring people to get to work with families. And one thing that we knew was that with kids being taken out of their homes and just put into foster care, that the quicker we could get them back, if they could get back, the quicker we could get them back, the better. So it had to happen. It had to happen fast. And I had started writing at that point. I started realizing that my literature was totally informed by what I was going through all the time. And you can't take a story out of a therapy session and stick it into a book unless you have a really good lawyer and no ethics. But you hear one story, 5 stories, 50 stories, and the truth starts to float. And those similarities, those truths are the things that you put into your characters' lives, your made-up characters' lives, and those characters become real. And at the same time I was doing that, I was also working with these families. So there was this wonderful kind of juxtaposition between the life in my imagination and the lives that were going on around me. And the lovely part about the life in my imagination is that I get to decide how it ends. And that there's a certain empowerment to that. So when we came up on this title of our kids in this time, I had a pretty good way to go. I mean, I can go back into the 1950s and 60s and grab that Chris Crutcher and drag him up into the 2000s and give him a cell phone and a computer, and there's not a whole lot of difference. So kids. And then Nick Cruz walks into Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School on Valentine's Day and reminded our entire country that a card with a heart in it just isn't enough. That someplace this stuff starts, and it starts early, and we got to get to it. And the horror for me, and I usually take out my rage on Facebook. The horror for me in this was that all of a sudden here came that stupid gun argument again. It's not about guns, it's about people. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, people who don't have guns don't shoot people. And I looked at that situation, and I mean, it was all over the news, and I had the same thing was happening to me. It was happening to everybody else. You just couldn't turn it off. You wanted to turn it off, but you couldn't turn it off. And then I remembered the Freeman shooting, not very long, 6 months ago, and I went out there. And one of the things, I was horrible thing, the way the people were feeling, and we knew people, we knew these people. But this kid walked into Freeman High School, and he had an AR-15 in a duffel bag. And as he's trying to get the AR-15 out of the duffel bag, he puts it down on the ground. He goes down there to pick it up. He's going to put the magazine in. And one kid walks up to him, and all he said was, "You're going to get in trouble if you do that." And it freaked the kid out. He never got the AR-15 up. He never got the magazine into the AR-15. The kid who stood in front of him was killed. Sam was killed. 1 kid killed. 3 kids injured. The hallways were full. Nobody was in class. If he'd have gotten that AR-15 out, it's mathematics. So the part, on the one hand, I mean, that part of it it enrages me, because there's only one thing that pops up with all these shootings. It's the gun. But that's not, all that tells me is, you have all these people, it's not about guns, it's about mental health. Of course it's about mental health. What isn't about mental health? But one of the things that we have to look at is that, I was a therapist for a long, long time. And I remember back before Columbine, back in the Moses Lake shootings, and Barry Lukitis walks into his classroom in the afternoon, kills several students, kills the teacher, wounds a couple more. And he's, the argument, goes clear back to him. And I had written a story after the Lukitis shooting, because I was a therapist in town, because I wrote stories. KHQ called me up and they said, we want you to come in and just talk about how can we see this kind of thing coming. Well, they didn't use anything I had to say because I didn't know how to see this thing coming. And neither did anybody that I knew. Nobody knew how to see this stuff coming. I said, I'll tell you what, I've got about 5 or 6 kids on my caseload right now who have this kind of rage. Now, I don't think any of them are going to do it, but I don't know that they aren't. But if you called me up tomorrow and said, one of those kids did it, who do you think it was? I'd have had a 1 in 5 or 6 chance of telling them which one. So there's no way in the world that it goes that direction. And then I start going back and I say, well, what's the answer? And I say it every time one of these school shootings happens. Because they're symptomatic of a whole bunch of other things, bad things that happen in our culture. And I go back and I think, where does this stuff start? And I remember, as I'm raging on Facebook, somebody who must have taken pity on me. They sent a link to my website, and I clicked on the link. And it was a story about a woman. The woman who wrote the article is a woman named Glennon Melton, and I think she wrote it for Reader's Digest. But what she was talking about is a teacher called her up, or she called the teacher up, and she said, "My kid is coming home with all these math problems, and I don't even know if they're math problems. I need help." Teacher said, well, just, I'll stay after school any day you want and tutor him. She said, I don't want to tutor him. He gets it. Tutor me. I don't get it. So she goes to the school and they have this discussion about math, but then they just have a little talk about what a monstrous responsibility it is to be one of those people that's going to be working with children all this time. And the teachers, and I know this because my life as a teacher was a lot tougher than my life as a therapist, because you could come into my office and we might spend 7 or 8 sessions trying to figure out some way for you to find a way to influence what happens next in your life, to find a little bit of empowerment, to be able to walk a little further. But you didn't have to know long division when you left my office. You didn't have to know how to diagram a sentence when you left my office. And there was only one of you at a time, or 2. So it's this awful thing, and they're talking about this. They're talking about this responsibility. And the teacher, and this is what Glennon writes about the teacher. She said, every Friday afternoon, she asks her students to take out a piece of paper and write down the names of 4 children with whom they'd like to sit the following week. The children know that these requests may or may not be honored. She also asks the students to nominate one student who they believe is an exceptional classroom citizen this week. All ballots are privately submitted. Every single Friday afternoon, after the students go home, she takes out those slips of paper, places them in front of her, and studies them. She looks for patterns. Who's not getting requested by anybody else? Who can't think of anybody to request? Who never gets noticed enough to be nominated? Who had 1 million friends last week and none this week? You see, Chase's teacher is not looking for a new seating chart or exceptional citizens. Chase's teacher is looking for lonely kids. She's looking for children who are struggling to connect with other children. She's identifying the little ones who are falling through the cracks of the class's social life. She's discovering whose gifts are going unnoticed by their peers, and she's pinning down right away who's being bullied and who's doing the bullying. As a teacher, a parent, a lover of all children, I think this is the most brilliant love ninja strategy I've ever encountered. It's like taking an x-ray of a classroom to see beneath the surface of things and into the hearts of students. It's like mining for gold, the gold being those children who need a little help, who need adults to step in and teach them how to make friends, how to ask others to play, how to join a group, or how to share their gifts. And it's a bully deterrent because every teacher knows that bullying usually happens outside her eyeshot, and that often kids being bullied are too intimidated to share. But as she said, the truth comes down in those safe, private little sheets of paper. As Chase's teacher explained this simple and ingenious idea, I stared at her with my mouth hanging open. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "Ever since Columbine. Every single Friday since Columbine." I mean, how sweet is that? So, one of the things that I knew is when we're talking about these kids these days, our kids these days and all of that, is that the minute I turned on my television set and saw what happened in Parkland, that everything that I was going to talk about just kind of went out the window. Because I wanted to go back and see, in my mind, from my stories, in my mind, from my relationships, things like that, where does this start? And I go back to those years back in the early time when I started working at the mental health center, and it was a really vibrant time. Number one, there was funding, and there were programs all over the place. And one of the things that happened, we were at the mental health center, and somebody called us up from Head Start. And they said, "We got 17 kids out here, all of whom are in foster care, or they've just been in foster care, but they're trying to integrate with their families. If you would send a therapist out here to work with the families, because they're already out there anyway, we've got a magical play therapist, and we'll combine those things and make things work." So the supervisor comes to me and she says, "Well, you're going to be the person that goes out there and works with the older people, and the magical play therapist can guide you through the rest." Well, here's what I knew about the magical play therapist. We were down at the mental health center one day. She worked both places. We were down at the mental health center one day, and we were getting ready to go into work in our big groups in the child abuse project. This is before we went out to Head Start. And she had been referred a little girl who had been sexually molested, and everybody knew she had been sexually molested, but nobody could get the disclosure. Kid had never been to the mental health center, was working with a different therapist. Foster mom brings the little kid in. There are 7 of us therapists standing in the hall, probably 10 yards from the front desk. So we're just standing there. Only one guy, me. The little girl is standing there, and she looks down the hall, and she leaves her foster mom who's checking in, never has been in the building, never has seen any of us, walks up and grabs Carol's hand and takes her to the room. So it's like there's this piece, there's a thing that happens. And then I started seeing her work. And one of the things that I saw with her work is that when she started working with these kids, she disappeared. She disappeared. And we would see what the world looked like through those little kids' eyes. And it was stunning. And it was particularly stunning if you're an American male, because we are punitive. We like to get even. We like to scold. We like to make you behave because you're afraid of us, at the same time that we're giving you good information. And that's a hard sell for a kid who's been treated the way a lot of the kids that we were being treated. So I go out to the Head Start, and I'm a little nervous because I know I can work with the adults, and that's my expertise, is adolescents and adults. I don't know anything about little kids. I mean, I like to read stories to them. I like to eat lunch with them. There are all kinds of things I like to do, but I didn't know if they had therapy for little kids. And so I go out there and I said, like, what should I do? And she said, well, the kids here who have been physically abused, statistically, it was probably a guy. So these kids aren't going to know whether you're a good guy or a bad guy. So when you come in there, don't be pushing yourself on anybody, and don't be trying to tell people things. Just kind of sit back and let them come to you. And some will come quick, and some will wait and see how, see what happens. But don't judge, don't scold, just be a witness. I'm thinking, I don't have to do anything. This is my favorite job. So we go out, and there's 17 kids, and one of the little kids, I'll just call him Kevin, one little kid is there, and he is the toughest kid I've ever seen. He's like 5 years old because his head start, so 3.5 to 5, and 4 and 5 mostly. And this kid is just tough. I mean, he's got these little Popeye arms on him, and he walks into the room every day, and I mean, he could take out any 2 kids in the place. He could take out any 2 kids in the place. And he scared me. I mean, I wanted to wear a cup because he's that height, man. So, since I wasn't doing anything of any value, my job was to keep your eye on Kevin, because Kevin is going to go after somebody on his bad days. Now, the scary thing about Kevin for me was that he could take any 2 kids in the room, but he never went after the tough kids. He always went after the weak kid. And the weak kid owned my heart, because she was a girl who had been blinded by a blow to the head by a boyfriend. And the guy who did it had killed the child of a client that I had worked with earlier. And he's 3 years in jail, out, not even on parole, and got somebody else. So even though I didn't know her, I had this little girl walked on rice paper. Because, number one, she couldn't see anything coming from one side. And boy, he, on a bad day, so my job, get Kevin. And I was vigilant. I was doing a good job. I could get the back of his collar so quick it wasn't even funny. One day he comes in, walks in, takes off his coat, throws it on the floor, and I mean, he's just looking around, and she's down there walking around, and I'm going, there's no chance this little bugger's getting away from me today. And then there was a commotion out back, and some parents of another kid came in, and there was some hollering and yelling, and I turned around to go see if I could help, and I was vigilant 99% of the time, and Kevin was vigilant 100% of the time, and the minute I turned around, he took off. He's got a block in his hand, and he's headed straight for Jessica. And I can't get there. And I'm going, and luckily, this magical play therapist sees him, and she doesn't get it to him before he gets the blow, but it's a glancing blow. And she grabs him. I can still see it. She grabs him, and she's sliding across the floor with him. And I think she's going to just chew that little bugger's butt out. And I heard her say, "You must be terrified." And he burst into tears. He just sobbed. And I'm way behind the curve on this. I don't get it. And I go back after her. What happened? She said, "He hates weakness. He doesn't hate anybody. He doesn't hate these kids. He hates weakness. If you're weak in his house, the hammer comes down. When he sees it, he wipes it out. The level of anxiety that he feels in the presence of weakness governs all. And that's going to take his anxiety down." And I think, I just got a picture of something that I don't have the imagination for. Until this very minute, I don't have the imagination for this. And I became instantly a better therapist with every age human being. Because everybody had a story. Everybody that I ran into had a story that I didn't know about. And I was like everybody else. I'm one of those guys that says, why wouldn't a person do this and this and this the same way I would do it? Why wouldn't a person do that thing that makes them feel healthy? Why wouldn't a person do? Why wouldn't? Well, there's a reason. There's an answer to that, and that's because if the world through their eyes doesn't look the same. And then I go back and I look at those kids and I think, God, you got to get to these kids when they're Kevin. And I think, wait a minute, you got to get to them before they're Kevin. Because I was out at Head Start and I started thinking, 5-year-olds are old. It's already in there. We got to go earlier. We got to go earlier. We got to go earlier. And then I think, what a dirty trick to have these things happen before you have a language, before you have a way to stop them. And I'm a big evolution guy. I think we're all lucky. We all won the lottery being here. You know, you go one screwed up sperm or egg back on past salamanders and we don't make the cut. And it seems like once we get here, we ought to get a little better shot. The last story for me it happened a lot later, but it really informed, it brought all this together, and I'll finish with this. And I can't tell this story without choking up, so I'll just choke up. One of the reasons that I was able to do this job the way I was able to do it, and with the intensity that I was able to do it and all of that, was that I didn't have kids. I didn't have biological kids. One of the things that would happen with therapists that we worked with in the early going was that they'd be working, they'd come out of school, they'd be working with these kids, and then they'd have a baby of their own. And they couldn't do it anymore because your imagination goes to that baby. And so we'd lose them, they'd drop off. That didn't happen for me. By the time I got with my partner, her kids were, my partner is also that same play therapist, her kids were like 7 and 11. And the minute I got with those guys, I thought, I just got a gift. I couldn't love my own kids more than these guys. And I never had to change a diaper. And I never had to get up in the middle of the night. I didn't ever have to do, these guys, they had already passed me emotionally and intellectually. So all I had to do was be cool. These kids never called me dad, but they wanted me to be their kid's granddad. Now that's about my level of, I like, the very favorite, and this is just an aside, the very favorite line any kid ever said to me is Justin's oldest daughter, when she was like 7, 8. Grandpa, thanks for teaching me that life is a joke. Because I love to laugh. Well, when she was born, I had not had that experience of doing the work that we did. And a long time ago, I started working as a chairperson for it's a volunteer organization, chairperson for the Spokane Child Protection Team. And the Child Protection Team is a group of people, volunteers from every walk of the world that does anything with kids, that has child protection involved with it. So public health nurses and therapists and teachers and social workers, the whole thing. And because I did that, I would, at the time, anytime there was a child death in anywhere in the region, and that child was a ward of the state, there had to be a death review. And because I ran the child protection team, I would often be put in charge of the death review. And it's really, really rugged duty, because it means a child has been killed. It means that what you're trying to do is go back and find out what happened. So you interview everybody. You interview anybody that you can get to come talk to you about from the family. You interview the social worker. You interview everybody. And it's really, really precarious, because when you write it down, part of what you're trying to do is say, is there any way we could have stopped this? Well, you know all about hindsight. So it was just, it had a hugely intense piece to it. And the one, I was kind of going back to this one that was just particularly bad. And the reason it was particularly bad is that we had so many people to interview. It was an all-day process. And the last person to come in to talk to the panel was the coroner. And that was always tough, because the coroner comes in with pictures. And this was a 6-month-old baby with bruises and broken bones, and once the x-rays are in, and it's been going on a long time. And I don't know what it was. I'd done it before, and I knew how to get my distance, but one picture just got me. It was a 6-month-old baby on a stainless steel slab. And this didn't happen very often, but I said I had to go to the restroom, and I went to the restroom, and I just sat there and hyperventilated, because I knew the same thing was going on for everybody in the room. Came back in. We got through it. 20 years later, Justin's teaching at Michigan, at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and they have a baby, brand new baby. Justin used to play football for the University of Washington. He's about 6, at playing weight is like 267 pounds. He's like 6'6". Out of school while he's about 280, 6'6", huge man. and as protective as any human being you'll ever want to be around. And Justin's getting ready. We're back in Ann Arbor. We're seeing the baby. And Justin is getting ready to go to teach his class. And so he's lying on the bed, and he's in a circle around Mia. This probably isn't true, but in my mind, she was in the exact same position as that baby on the slab. And Justin thought I walked in the room and got tears in my eyes and ran out because they were tears of joy. But what they were tears of every chance, no chance. And I think, for us as human beings, for us as adults, whether we're in the world of child protection or the world of education, if we're just in the world, if there is some beautiful spiritual thing to do, it is to make that bridge between those two kids so that doesn't happen. There's no chance. You can have a lot of every chance. Thank you.
Well, you're not going to find this last hymn up on the screen today because I changed it first service. So grab a turquoise hymnal and turn to number 1012. It's called When I Am Frightened. I think it underlines Chris's points better than the first hymn I chose. So if you would please stand as you're willing and able to sing number 1012, When I Am Frightened.
When I
Maybe I should have warned you to have a Kleenex present during that sermon. The closing words I've selected today are by William Murray from our hymnal. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us rejoice and be glad in them. These are the days of our lives. Let us live them well in love and service. These are the days of mystery and wonder. Let us cherish and celebrate them in gratitude together. These are the days that have been given to us. Let us make of them stories worth telling to those who come after us. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.